Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Fall FedEx Sanderson Farms Data Dive Show. Got a lot to get into. We have some research to get into that I posted to social media. A couple of shout outs here. So first off, thanks for the comment. A new subscriber and viewer of the show, his name is Jeremy. Jeremy let me know in the comments of the show last night that he had hit a winner on the DP World Tour during the 3-week hiatus that Calls was on in between the Fortinet and this week, hitting Rio Hitsatsune, somebody who I have followed a little bit on these foreign tours, has come over and played a little bit stateside, has performed fairly well. So congratulations, Jeremy, on your hit. And a reminder to anyone else out there that if you have had success, whether it is in golf, football, baseball, anything of that nature, if you've had success with wagers or DFS contests, to let me know in the comments of the shows. Reach out to me on social media. I would be more than happy to shout out more members of the community like Jeremy who have had success in the recent in these recent tournaments in the recent past. But we have a lot to get into, some weather to look at, trying to figure out what metrics that we want to look at for the Sanderson Farms. I'm quite excited, so let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money in terms of golf analytics. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media, my Twitter and Instagram, where I posted some research today around the Sanderson Farms, previous winners, some metrics and stats that generally play well at the Country Club of Jackson. So if you would like to see that research, then give me a follow at your preferred social media site, X or Twitter or Instagram. Twitter is also where I place my betting cards weekly on the PGA Tour. That'll be no different. I went ahead and fired off a couple of wagers this afternoon when doing some of that research, and I liked quite a few numbers today, but I only fired off a couple. But my betting cards will be out Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see the weekly wagers I make for the PGA Tour, give me a follow over at X or Twitter as well. And then finally, Gabe's X or Twitter handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It is a very good read, great way to start your week, and he updates you throughout the week, giving his look at prior course form, recent history, all of that stuff, doing it in a different way than I do. So when you get two analytical minds working together, generally you're going to have some pretty good results. We've worked together now for quite a while, a lot of good success. And if you are a subscriber to his article, which is free, by the way, over on Substack, if you're a subscriber to that article, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday evening as we continue the DFS talk after calls. So make sure you go show Gabe some support, subscribe to that article, follow him over on social media. And then finally, for this intro, we are live. Chat is open. In addition to any winners that you have had recently, have you made any wagers for the Sanderson Farms? If so, what do you? How do you see the course playing? Who do you think has the upper hand or the edge early on this week? What do you think? Or how do you think the course will play? All that good stuff. I'm going to stop rambling. Let's get into what we're here for. Let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2023 Fall FedEx Sanderson Farms. And we're going to start, as we always do, on a Monday evening. If my camera decides to focus, although it might be better viewing for you all. Yeah, should be up and going. Sorry about that. My camera decided not to focus for whatever reason, although it probably would have been better viewing for you all. Well, I just don't want to be all that blurry in my own video. We're going to start, as we always do on a Monday evening, over at Windfinder and get a feel for what the forecast looks like for the Sanderson Farms. So Thursday doesn't look like a whole lot. Most of the time, I'm going to cheat. We're going to go over to Fantasy National, take a look at the wind here. A lot of times you'll have moderate, calm to moderate. What you won't see, generally speaking, is any windy conditions in Jackson, Mississippi at this time of year, especially for the Sanderson Farms. And Thursday, we're getting a whole lot of the same here. Not a whole lot of wind. Now, Friday, especially in the afternoon, does look like a cold front could be coming through here. And the winds look like they're picking up quite a bit. Sustained winds and gusts. So this is something we're definitely going to need to keep an eye on throughout the week. And I suggest that you do so as well. Seeing what the forecast looks like. It looks like a cold front is coming through. A high of in the low 70s for Saturday. When Friday is close to 90. If the forecast holds, you would definitely have an advantage for the Thursday PM, Friday AM half of the draw, but even the tee times aren't out yet. So this is just something to keep in mind as we move forward this week and into tomorrow and Wednesday when we're filling out our DFS lineups. If the forecast holds, we're going to want to see what wave advantage, if any, if the winds are going to stay up and all that stuff. And then Saturday morning looks like it could be a little bit gusty. Maybe not necessarily the sustained winds, but a little bit gusty. And then Sunday looks fantastic. Very little wind, high of 80. Just looks pristine on Sunday. But as of right now, perhaps a little bit of some wind in the forecast. So something to definitely keep an eye on as we move forward this week. We'll move to Fantasy National, and you see I have the time frame set to the beginning of this calendar year, last 36 rounds. Before I forget, there have been 2 more field changes. Thanks to Rob Bolton and his Twitter feed. He keeps constantly updating field changes throughout the week. 2 more field changes from last night. Aaron Baddeley and Grayson Murray have withdrawn. They are not playing this week. So now there are 4 players who have withdrawn from the Sanderson Farms since the field was released Friday evening. Nikolai Højgaard, Ryder Cupper, Joseph Bramlett, those 2 had withdrawn over the weekend. Aaron Baddeley and Grayson Murray have done so today. So those are the 4 players that have withdrawn. So anybody with a star, we're going to have to skip over as we look through some rankings tonight. All right. We just got back from the Windfinder forecast. Even though there only looks to be a little bit of wind for Friday afternoon and Saturday morning, we can take a look here very, very quickly. And you can see just the sheer lack of rounds that have been classified as moderate or windy this calendar year. So we're going to have to expand this timeline here, go all the way back to the beginning of 2022. Many, many more rounds here. So since the beginning of 2022, your top performers in moderate and windy conditions: Emiliano Grillo, Scott Piercy, Tom Hoagie, Keith Mitchell, Alex Smalley, Alex Noren, Cameron Percy, Christian Bezaidnout, Adam Long, and Kevin Yu. Don't want to put a whole lot of emphasis into that. We will update the wind forecast as we always do at the beginning of the DFS Tactics show on Wednesdays. Something else that we are going to want to do is take a look at some easy course metrics. I'm still not comfortable or confident looking at easy course filters with a lot of confidence. We talked about this a little bit last night, and how you have several rounds that are generally average. Now, yes, 2022, every single round played to easy, but most often the cut lines, the winning scores, The cut lines are generally in this -2 range, -1 to -2, which would be average. The winning scores are into the upper teens, 17, 18, 19. Sometimes you do get into the 20s. Certainly on the easier end of the spectrum, but nothing that would signify that this is an easy tournament overall. But in terms of performance in rounds that are easy, this calendar year, our top performers are Doug Gim, Peter Quest, Dylan Wu, Eric Cole, Alex Smalley, Stefan Jaeger, Alex Noren, Ludwig Ober, Bo Hostler, and Akshay Bhatia. Again, skipping Nikolai Højgaard, he is withdrawn. All right, not a whole lot to do in terms of review. I talked about last night as well how even though the GCSAA tournament fact sheet lists this at over 7,400 yards, the Fantasy National has not listed this as over 7,400 in a long time. Going all the way back from 2019 was the last time it was listed as over 7,400. And you even had a round where it was less than 7,200 one time. So not confident at all in the long course filter. I would be more confident in the easy to par filter than I am on the long course filter. So instead, let's just go ahead and start looking at some of these prior leaderboards. I definitely wanted to do this. Let's take a look at some prior leaderboards and figure out some of the metrics that we think are going to play the most advantageous for these players this week at the Country Club of Jackson. So we'll start with some strokes gained. We saw last night, and already 2023 is backing that up, that around the green really doesn't play a whole lot of a factor. We highlight the top 18 here, just convenient for ties. You have a few players, 3 that are negative and off the tee, but really only one was extremely poor. Only a couple negative in approach, and one was essentially field average. But the biggest thing that we talked about last night, we'll continue to talk about it this week, it's all about the putting. And you see only one player negative in terms of putting. If we sort, we have some decent correlation up here. A 4th, a 5th, a 3rd, a couple of top 20s, but it's not a direct correlation. If we look at approach, certainly a lot stronger than off the tee. 5th, 9th. Top 25, nothing to scoff at from Ben Griffin. 5th, your winner is pretty high up here in terms of approach as well. Runner-up. So very strong correlation here in terms of strokes gained approach. If we go to the putting, even though the winner is a little bit further down in here, you still see the strong correlation. A top 30, middling-ish finish from Adam Long, top 15, top 5, top 10, top 25, a couple of clunkers, runner-up, top 10, top 10. Putting is going to be a big deal, especially since, Adam Long looks like he kind of ran away with the putting leaderboard there, 9.9, but really kind of tightens up here around 6.9, 6.1, 5.8, whereas if we go to the approach, you do have a couple of 7s, but very quickly you go into the 4s up here in terms of approach, whereas you have a little bit more of some upper echelon numbers here for the putting. If we go to 2022, or at least the season of 2022, this is actually calendar year 2021, the year Sam Burns won. Again, highlighting, we'll go to the top 16 here just due to ties. Much more the same. You have several players that are negative and around the green. It can contribute to a win. See Mackenzie Hughes from last year, but it's not mandatory. I mean, Sam Burns was only a half a shot above average in terms of around the green. He did it in his ball striking. It's surprising to see that he actually lost strokes in putting, but only 2 players negative off the tee. Only 1 player negative in approach, and it is, again, right at field average. Only 1 player in the top 16 negative in putting. And some of these numbers are ridiculously high, 11.7. You've got a couple of 6s and 7s I see a little bit down here, an 8.5. So again, if we sort your winner, led and off the tee, fourth, a middling to clunker finish, depending on what you classify a T45, top 10, top 20, top 5, runner-up is pretty high up here as well. Approach, fourth and first, but much less correlating than last year's Sanderson Farms, as you have a couple of miscuts pretty high up here, although all they did was hit their approaches. You see they did not putt well, didn't particularly drive the ball well either, and that's why they were missing the cut. And then the aforementioned video game numbers from Nick Watney, Nate Lashley, 8.5. But you still have a lot of 5s and a lot of 4s up here, and a whole lot of correlation second. Top 20, top 15, middling top 30, top 5, runner-up top 5. I mean, it's all about the putting here at the Sanderson Farms. So with that, I will get this prepped for the next page view, if you will, get to the correct year. Let's take a look at a few different things. We took a look at some of this last night, but it's always good to be reminded. So we saw that off the tee, approach, and especially the putting are going to be very big facets this year, or at least they have been in the past. I would expect them to be again this year. So our top off the tee players in the past 36 rounds have been Brent Grant, Garrick Higo, Ludwig Ober, Doug Gim, Kevin Yu, MJ Duffy, Hayden Buckley, S.H. Kim, Ryan Palmer, and Sam Bennett. Moving to approach. Top players in the last 36 rounds in terms of approach. Alex Smalley, Kevin Roy, Mark Hubbard, Ches Reavie, Sam Ryder, Eric Cole, Doug Gim, Nate Lashley, Ted Potter Jr., and Kevin Streelman. But the most important facet that you are going to want to focus on in terms of strokes gained is going to be on the putting. So we're going to bring in some Bermuda. We're going to filter on fast and lightning speed greens, as every single round the past 3 years here at the Country Club of Jackson has been lightning. They have never been anything other than fast or lightning. So that's why we are going fast and lightning in terms of filters. Our top putters on fast and lightning Bermuda greens in the past 36 rounds have been Chad Ramey, Alex Noren, Chesson Hadley, Ben Taylor, Cameron Percy, Dylan Fratelli, Ryan Brim, Ben Griffin, Dylan Wu, and Carson Young. Again, skipping Nikolai Højgaard, he is withdrawn. So there's a look at some of the players that you're going to want to focus this week, especially in terms of the putting, since it's going to be such a major focal point that you can imagine that these players are going to be rising quite significantly in my rankings. I'll highlight, down to the top 30 or so. Looks like bottom of your screen here is Snedeker, Eric Cole, so a couple of more names down here for you. Matthias Schmid, Patton Gazire, Bryce Garnett, K.H. Lee. Those are your players that are top 30. In fact, I need to do one more, as he's essentially tied for 30th. And I will swivel out of the way there for you. You can get a sense of who some of the players that are going to rise in my rankings, especially since I think putting is going to be probably the most important facet this week, and who has putt well on fast and lightning Bermuda greens. If you want some specifics, I put some specifics around the Country Club of Jackson, the specific Bermuda grass, which is Champion Bermuda. I put some specifics around Champion Bermuda in my research out on social media, X and Instagram. So if you want to see some of those specifics, I encourage you, I ask you to go check that out over on social media. So we'll move now to scoring, and we're going to be looking at birdies and bogeys for the Sanderson Farms. And we saw last night how, even though bogey avoidance was a little bit of a factor, and there are eagles to be had here at the Country Club of Jackson, it's really just about the birdies. You're going to have to get quite a few birdies to contend here. Even though this isn't a birdie fest, it's not an easy tournament, generally speaking. There are several birdies to be had at the Country Club of Jackson. And we went through the scorecard last night. A third of a shot under par, 3/10, a quarter of a shot, 1700s. There are just a lot of good opportunities for birdies here. Not a lot in terms of eagles. Now, yes, you do have the shorter par 5, yields an eagle at 2.5%. That's a decent rate. You do have a drivable par 4 that can yield an eagle for some of the bigger hitters. But overall, not a whole lot in terms of eagles. So we're definitely going to be looking at birdies or better this week. But again, speaking to the scoring and how it is pertained to previous champions and previous Sanderson farms, again, highlighting the top 18, not a single player negative in terms of birdies or bogeys. However, a lot of these numbers are much bigger, are drastically higher in terms of the birdies gained. Now, your winner was pretty even, 7.6 to a 2, 8.6 to a 4, 7.6 to a 0. Most of your top performers at the Sanderson Farms are heavily favoring the birdies gained. And you can see there aren't a lot of eagles. Yes, Thomas Detry, he had quite a few eagles, it looks like. Didn't even lead. Tosti and Sink actually led in eagles gained. But if we sort, and you can see that just the lack of correlation there. But if we sort on the birdies gained, 3rd, 2nd, 5th, 9th, 1st, 5th, 5th, it's extreme. It's an extreme amount of correlation, whereas the bogey avoidance is strong, but you have some 30ths and some top 20s and a 45th up here from Adam Hadwin. They are going to help contribute to making the cut, but if you're wanting some elite success here, you're gonna have to get the birdies gained. So that's one of the probably 3 to 4 big statistical categories that I'm going to be focused on this week. First off being the putting, probably the most important. Next, being probably birdies gained. It's either second or third. Birdies gained is something that you are absolutely going to have to compete here. Go to 2022 and its scoring. Highlighting the top 16, you actually have a player that was slightly negative in terms of bogeys avoided. But look at your upper end success, 8.5, 9.5, 6.5. You got a 7.5 just outside the top 10 here. And most of these players, again, are favoring the birdies gained, some by a big amount. And Sam Burns didn't get a whole lot of eagles. He was negative in terms of eagles gained. It's a lot about the birdies. So 8.5 to 4, 9.5 to a 0. These are much more balanced, but they're still favoring the birdies. Sort on it, 2nd, 1st, 11th, 2nd, 4th, 39th from Paul Barjon. He got a lot of birdies, just couldn't avoid the bogeys, it seems like, but 4th, 4th, 8th. Whereas you go to the bogeys, actually pretty darn strong, to be fair. 2nd, 31st, 1st, 4th, 4th, 8th, 8th. So a little bit more, a little stronger correlation in 2022 than it was last year's, but still heavy emphasis on the birdies gained. So with that, let me set this and get this prepared for the next page view. We come to the scoring page view for this week's field. And we're going to be looking at birdies or better gained. And we'll look at this in a couple of different ways. Most likely, I'm going to be using the scoring metric with the scoring filter. That's what I prefer, to keep it uniform, to have a scoring metric and a scoring filter. We could maybe look at long course, although I'm not terribly confident in it. But the thing that makes the most sense to me, let's just look at easy relative to par. Your top birdies or better gained players this calendar year, the past 36 rounds. So in easy rounds, last 36 rounds, as long as it has been this calendar year. Your top birdies or better gained players: Peter Quest, Dylan Wu, Ludwig Aubert, Luke List, Eric Cole, Akshay Bhatia, Tom Hoagie, Harry Higgs, Doc Redman, Garrick Higo, and Peter Malnati. You see a lot of correlation between birdies or better and the birdies in general. Aubert, Hoagie, a little bit further down here, Scott Piercy, Alex Smalley have been gaining eagles at a higher rate when it's been easy. Those are opportunities. In terms of eagles, it's really just Garrick Higo who's been extremely good at eagles as well. You have Aubert 13th, Tom Hoagie 20th. So if somebody were to be very good at eagles, which would contribute to, some higher numbers in terms of the birdies or better gained, maybe somebody like Davis Thompson here, who's been very good at eagles, maybe not necessarily the birdies. He might be somebody that you would want to back off a little bit in consideration, since eagles do happen here. They're just not in a wide abundance. It's mostly in the birdies. But since eagles do happen, that's why we're looking at birdies or better gained. Very quickly, if you were to be interested in birdies or better on long courses, going to have to expand the timeline. As you see, there's not enough rounds for everybody in the field this week. So if you want to look at birdies or better on long courses, your top performers in that regard: Sam Stevens, Akshay Bhatia, Ben Martin, Webb Simpson, Nate Lashley, Chad Ramey, Harry Hall, Brandon Matthews, Matthias Schwab, and Kyle Westmoreland. So quite a bit of a different list of names here, and that's why I am more comfortable using the easy to par filter than the long course. I don't see this. I don't see the Country Club of Jackson setting up extremely long this week. I just don't. So there is a look at another list of players who you probably should not be surprised if they rise considerably in my rankings come Wednesday night with this birdies or better gained, especially with the easy to par filter. A little bit lower. We only went through the top 10, but a little lower here. Scott Piercy, Alex Smalley, Satoshi Kadiras, H. Kim, Keith Mitchell, Hayden Buckley, and so on down. Tyler Duncan is your 30th or 31st in the top 30 for birdies better gained when a round has been easy. All right, we're going to set this up for the fairways and greens. Let's take a look at the driving and greens. Good drives gained page view here in Fantasy National for prior leaderboards. And we noticed in Microsoft Excel last night, we'll see it again tonight, how distance seemed like it mattered, especially against other full field courses. You've got some decent numbers here, but you got a few players that are negative as well. In fact, I made a note of it last night. Nobody is negative in greens. But I don't know how much I want to put emphasis into that, because these greens are generally pretty easy to hit, so everybody should be hitting these greens. And that's why putting is such a big deal here for the Sanderson Farms, is that if majority of your players are hitting the greens, then it becomes a putting contest. If we sort, you've got some cut making up here, but by no means would I say this is correlating at all. Well, no wonder, because I'm sorting it on the wrong, sorting it descending. Dumbass. All right. Sorting on distance. I mean, again, you got a little bit here. You got some top finishers, top 5, top 10, top 15, but not a whole lot of correlation here. Not a lot of correlation. Whereas if you go to the greens, at least at the top end of the greens in regulation leaderboard, you've got a lot of upper end success. It really falls off quickly after that. Okay, 2022 and fairways and greens, top 16. A few players that are negative. Now you do have some higher numbers here. Cameron Young, that's kind of his game. Trey Mullinax, kind of his game. Sahith Theegala, Will Zalatoris, but it doesn't preclude you from competing, which is surprising to me because I really thought driving distance was going to be one of the key focal points this week, and at least in the past couple of years, it hasn't been mandatory. Again, only one player negative in terms of greens. So if we sort on distance, runner up, top 5, top 20, some good finishes, top 20, sure, but nothing elite in terms of correlation. Whereas if you go to the greens, it's pretty hard to argue your winner led in the category for greens in regulation and probably in good drives. Yeah. Kind of hard to argue against that. An 8th, a couple of top 5s, a runner up, another top 10. Maybe greens is something. Good drives, much the same. It looks like it's basically all in the greens in regulation, essentially, is what it looks to be for good drives gained. So with that, I'll get this again set for the next page view. We go to this week's field. And, I guess we'll keep the easy filter on. Well, no, actually, you know what? Nah. Let's just go with just kind of straight up. In the last 36 rounds, we'll take a look at a couple of different things here. First, I still think driving distance is going to matter, although I am starting to waver on how important it's going to be, but I still think it's going to be a factor. So your top driving distance players in the field this week, the last 36 rounds: Brandon Matthews, Peter Quest, Kyle Westmoreland, Matthias Schmid, Cameron Champ, Brent Grant, MJ Duffy, Ludwig Aubert, Trevor Cohn, and Garrick Higo. A couple of these players, in fact, Brent Grant, elite at distance and excellent in fairways, at least for this field. So somebody to really keep an eye on there. Aubert, Garrick Higo, Cameron Champ, they're hitting plenty of fairways considering the amount of distance they have. Very quickly, just because we're looking at driving distance, let's see how this list compares when a round is easy by chance. So when a round is easy, top driving distance players: Peter Quest, Brandon Matthews, Trevor Cohn, Cameron Champ, Brent Grant, Matthias Schmid, Brim, Higo, Oberg, and Will Gordon. So a whole lot of overlap. You do have a couple of newer names in here. Will Gordon, I think, Ryan Brim. But Peter Quest, I believe, was second in driving distance overall. First when it's easy. Matthews is up there. Champ is always up there. Brent Grant. So I don't think I'm going to use the easy to par filter for driving distance or for greens. It's always good to take a look, see if there's a lot of either overlap or perhaps maybe a couple of names that stick out to you. And then we're going to be looking at greens as well. So our top greens in regulation gained players the last 36 rounds: Doug Gim, Alex Smalley, Luke List, Matthew Neesmith, Trevor Cohn, Russell Knox, Doc Redman, Lee Hodges, DJ Trahan, and Cameron Champ. Skipping Joseph Bramlett, he has withdrawn. So there's another list of players to consider. Not sure how much weight I'm going to be putting into greens or driving distance. I really thought driving distance would have a decent amount of weight in my mixed condition model, but going through these prior leaderboards, I'm starting to back off of that a little bit. Definitely in the putting, definitely in birdies gained, or birdies or better gained, I should say. But distance, maybe not. All right, now let's move to proximity. And we talked a little bit about this last night, how the majority of approach shots here at the Country Club of Jackson come from 100 to 150. And you have a few that come from 200 plus due to all of these par 5s generally being attackable in 2. So it wasn't a surprise to see the 200 plus perhaps give or lead itself to a lot of credence to be considered. But the 100 to 150 range was negative. At least for the players who have played consistently well here at the Country Club of Jackson. So let's see if we can't figure something out here in terms of these prior leaderboards and the proximities. So looking at last year's, a little bit here, you've got a couple of players that are pretty poor in total procs, but for the most part, pretty decent in terms of players that are, your upper end finishers and performing well in the statistic. Now, the 125 to 150 doesn't look like anything at all. You've got more red than green, seemingly. The 200 plus does have a lot of green in here. If we sort, it's okay, I suppose. Not great up here, but a top 25, a top 15, top 5, and a couple of top 10s is fine. In the ranges most common here at the Sanderson Farms, not a whole lot. I mean, your winner was fairly high here, but not a whole lot. This range really didn't look like it had anything at all. Sure, you have a couple of top 5s up here, but miscuts pretty high up here as well. 200 plus, you have some cut making. Not a whole lot else. If we look at 2022, proximity, not a lot here at all, seemingly. The total procs, not much at all. 200 plus was pretty shallow in terms of correlation. So I don't see a lot here. So in chat or in the comments, what do you think? Is there a proximity that seems to matter the most? If so, what do you think it is? I think I would have to lean towards the 200 plus, but we can look at that in a different way. That's kind of in the par 5 scoring. So I think that's where I'm going to put my focus with that. So instead, let's go straight into par 3 efficiencies. And it was interesting to note last night how in the course breakdown, the top 10s and the winners, especially the winners, have performed pretty darn well in the par 3s here at the Country Club of Jackson. And they kind of took a dip in the top 5s. So if we look at par 3 performance, especially for your elite finishers, players that finish in the top 10, dang it, unhighlight. Players that finish in the top 10, only a couple negative. And there doesn't seem to be a standout range. Remember, on the scorecard, there is one par 3 that measures to this range. This one here, one here, and 2 here. So it looks like it's just in the par 3s. You have a middling from, or a clunker from Austin Eckroat, but your winner's fairly high up here. A lot of top 10 finishers performed well at these par 3s. 2022, Sam Burns' win was very strong at them, 5.5. Not the highest. You had a 6.5 from Norlander, but 4th, 1st, couple of top 20s, runner-up, top 10, another top 20. Looking like par 3s are going to be a decent little factor, and it doesn't look like there's any range in particular. They look pretty evenly distributed. So for this week's field, moving to par 3s, your top par 3 performers In the field this week, Eric Cole, Andrew Novak, Lee Hodges, Carson Young, Russell Knox, Emiliano Grillo, Peter Quest, Nick Hardy, Ches Reavie, and Nate Lashley. So a lot of names are starting to overlap quite a bit. Eric Cole's been up there quite a bit. Peter Quest has been up there quite a bit. Ches Reavie, I know, was up there for the irons. I think he was up there for a couple other things as well. Nate Lashley just outside the top 10 in terms of par threes. He's been up there a bunch. We've said his name quite a bit tonight. Let's see, a little bit further down, Tom Hoagie, Grayson Sigg, Marty Doe. So there's a look at your top par 3 performers in the field this week. Moving to par 4s. This will be a little bit interesting to check out because you do have the drivable par 4, 0 to 350, but 60% of the par 4s at the Country Club Jackson fall from 400 to 450. So 1, 6, 2, and 1 are your ranges. And look, last year, even though there is a 500 plus par 4 on the scorecard, they actually never played it above 500 yards last year for actual tournament play. Interesting to note. All right, we sort on it. I mean, par 4s are always going to be really, really important, so no surprise in terms of the correlation. Some of these numbers are a little smaller, though, than some other tournaments, because there have been times where you've had multiple players above 10, into the 9s and the 8s. So this is a little bit, less in terms of, raw numbers in terms of strokes gained par 4. If we sort on the 400 450, not as correlating as I thought it would be. You have a missed cut pretty high up here. Your winner quite a bit further down, at least from last year. Looking like it was more terms of par 4s in total. If we go to 2022 and the par 4s. Come on, Fantasy National. Again, just a whole lot of correlation here. Nobody negative in terms of par 4s. Now, look here. In 2022, 400 450, only one player was negative in terms of the 400 450. So perhaps last year was an outlier. Again, pretty elite correlation up here in terms of the total par 4s. It's strong, but it's not elite. You don't have any, clunker made cuts, but you don't have your winner and a lot of your top 10s and top 5s up here extremely high. Maybe it's just par 4s. We'll take a look at both. All right, your top par 4 performers in the field this week. In the past 36 rounds, Doug Gim, Chesson Hadley, Alex Noren, Kevin Streelman, Bo Hostler, Sam Bennett, Justin Lauer, Ludwig Aubert, Alex Smalley, and Keith Mitchell. And then 400 450, which I think is the range that you would want to focus on if you're going to narrow in on a range of par 4s. Your top par 4 performers from 400 to 450 in the field this week: Doug Gim, Callum Tarrant, Bo Hostler, Hayden Buckley, Stefan Jaeger, Jimmy Walker, Justin Lauer, S.H. Kim, Emiliano Grillo, and Ben Griffin. All right, lastly, we'll take a look at par 5s. This is going to be pretty easy, as 3 of the 4 par 5s at the Country Club of Jackson measure 550 to 600. The only other one on the scorecard measures 600 to 650. But you can see the highest here is a 3.1. The highest in the 600 to 650 is a 2.5. Where in the 550 to 6, you have a plethora of 5s, only 1 4. But even after that 3.1, you quickly get into the 1.5s. Pretty high up here. So really it is all about the 550 to 600 range of par 5s here at the Country Club of Jackson. Oh shoot. If we sort on just the par 5s, Kyle Westmoreland, generally his thing, he takes advantage of par 5s. Apparently didn't do much else well last year, but a third or your runner-up, top 15, top 20, top 5, top 10. Couple top 15s, pretty darn important. Much the same, a little bit less because you have some middling finishes up here, but your winner was also much higher in terms of just 550 to 600 par 5s. 2022 and par fives. Sam Burns was much more equal in how he played them, but still played them very, very well, considering he was fourth in terms of total par fives. And you see just the sheer amount of importance, or correlation, I should say. Fourth, second, 11th, first, fourth, second, fourth, a little bit further down. 550 to 6, a little bit less than what I was thinking, to be honest with you. Sure, you have good finishes, top 11, top 15s, top 20s. Your winner's a little bit further down. You got some miscuts up here. So we'll do what we did for the par fours. Your top par five performers, regardless of length: Stefan Jaeger, Davis Thompson, Ryan Gerard, Ludwig Aubert, Akshay Bhatia, Scott Harrington, S.H. Kim, Lee Hodges, Garrick Higo, and Adam Long. And for the specific range that is most important here at the Country Club Jackson, from 550 to 600 yards, your top par 5 performers: Stefan Jaeger, Lee Hodges, Ryan Gerard, Adam Long, Akshay Bhatia, Ludwig Aubert, Wesley Bryan, Harry Higgs, MJ Duffy, and Dylan Wu. So a little bit of new names at the bottom half of the top 10 in terms of specific length of par 5s, but mostly you're going to want to focus on these players here for these par 5s, as they are a crucial point for the Sanderson Farms. Jaeger, Hodges, Gerard, Adam Long, Bhatia, Aubert, they are top 10 in both all par 5s and the specific length here. All right, with that is going to conclude the Fantasy National portion. I'm going to go to Microsoft Excel. We're going to look at a couple of different things here, but first, I am going to need to grab my water bottle, which I did not do. So this is last year's mixed condition model, or at least the mixed condition model from when Mackenzie Hughes won. And I like to go back and check and see what worked, what didn't, see how we can improve. So you see, in terms of my top 20, pretty solid, I would say. We have, what's this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A little bit high in terms of the number of players that missed the cut. Let's see, Griot, 5th, was kind of expected, pretty popular. Davis Riley, so Ben Griffin as a top 25 at 6.5%. That was fairly solid. Top 5 here from Nick Hardy at 6% was pretty solid, but a little too many miscuts for my liking. So definitely room for improvement here, especially since the winner is not in my top 20. So with that, let's see what we looked at. I had 25% in Bermuda Fast and Lightning green speeds. I did use the entire calendar year, so it looks like we're going to be doing much the same with that. And I had it at a full 25%. That's pretty heavy. That's pretty strong. We'll see how predictive they were here in a second. I had 20% in 550 to 600. I did only go back to the Memorial, which was about 3 months. Okay, but again, we're looking at 550 to 600 par 5s. 15% in birdies or better when a round was easy. So right off the bat, we're looking at 3 very, very similar metrics and filters. Maybe moving some percentages around, but this is kind of where I've been all week looking at the Country Club of Jackson. I did have 10% in off the tee, only 5% in approach, so definitely think the approach needs to be upped a little bit, especially considering what we saw in prior leaderboards. However, when we go to the predictive side, we'll see that the approach kind of underperformed in that regard. 5% driving distance. Okay, so I didn't actually have nearly as much weight in driving distance as I thought. Only 5% in par 3s. Only 5% in par 4s, total par 4s. So this is kind of what we were seeing the same. No specific range of par 3s, no specific range of par 4s. I did separate out 10 to 15 feet putting on fast and lightning Bermuda. So I don't think we're going to be looking at any specific range of putts, just putting in general. And then I did look at 3-putt avoidance. And I did make a casual mention of this last night when we were going through the course breakdown, that 3 putts per round here are right about tour average, which we haven't been on Bermuda in a while. So if players aren't familiar with Bermuda, we haven't had fast and lightning speed greens really in a while. So that could be contributing to it as well. But there's a look at the metrics and the percentages and weight that I had in my mixed condition model that produced an okay results-based mixed condition model, or produced okay results. The winner's not up here and a few too many missed cuts. But, Nick Hardy, 6%, top 5. You'll never complain about that. A top 25 from a 6.5%. Won't complain about that. All right, so how predictive were these? Well, if we were to sort on the leaderboard, meaning Mackenzie Hughes and then Sepp Straka and so on down, the lower the number, the better. Well, we see putting was at a 44.5. That's pretty darn good. That's pretty darn good out of a possible 140. So not bad. Not bad. Par 5s were at a 41. That's extremely correlating. Extremely predictive. Birdies are better at a 46. Solid. The best, however, was off the tee, which is a tad bit surprising. A tad bit, considering I thought approach would be a little bit more. But this off the tee number is very, very predictive, at least from last year's mixed condition model. So something to take a note of. So off the tee, very strong. The par 5 is very strong. Putting is strong as well. The approach was not predictive at all. It was the worst from last year. It was the worst. So players like Emiliano Grillo in 33rd factored in. Davis Riley in 51st. Let's see. Nick Hardy, 62nd in irons coming into the week. Detry was 52nd. Bradley was 69th. Let's see. Piercy, 92nd. So, but again, I was only going back to the Memorial. Yes, it was the same last 36 rounds, but I was only going back to the Memorial. So, give and take there. Perhaps we need to increase the timeline like we have been tonight, and look at full year as long as it's within the last 36. Perhaps we can look at last 24. Maybe that's the thing we need to do. But the approach was not very predictive. Driving distance was, and this is another reason why I think driving distance is going to play more of a factor than what I think some of the prior leaderboards have suggested. Generally speaking, your former champions, Sam Burns, Cameron Champ, Sergio, these guys could move it off the tee. So that's why I think driving distance is a little bit more important than what I think the prior leaderboards are showing. Par 3s were pretty darn predictive. The last 3, the par 4s, the specific length of putting, and the 3-putt avoidance, not as much. So looking at distance, looking at off the tee, birdies and better gained a little bit. Definitely the par 5 lengths here and the putting. So there's a look at last year's mixed condition model, how it performed, how predictive it was. Definitely have room for improvement here. So with that, let's take a look at some specifics around the Country Club of Jackson and the Sanderson Farms Championship. We see that the overwhelming strokes gained total number is in the putting. The approach, 2.45, and that's actually a little bit of a low outlier, so gets a little bit closer, but you can see just it's mainly about the putting here at the Sanderson Farms by a pretty big amount. In fact, off the tee last year was a low outlier, and it was pretty darn predictive. So, looking like we need to put in some focus on off the tee as well. You can see how much it jumps in terms of a total number there. Let's see, distance 14.1. It's a pretty darn big number. You had a couple of lower outliers, but you have a couple of bigger ones too. Not very consistent, so I don't like that. Let's see. Birdies, clearly much more than the bogeys. This is where we're really going to gain some insight. The par 3s, 4s, and 5s, and where the strokes gained in these lengths of holes come. So you see the par 3s measure at a 1.78, but these two lengths are essentially dead even. So instead of splitting out both lengths here, this looks like it's just a strokes gained par 3, which was pretty predictive last year. So that gives me a little bit of confidence there. Looking at par 4s, you got a 5. That's a pretty darn big number, to be fair. But only a 1.98 from the highest one. Not even, 40% of the strokes gained total. So it looks like, and in fact, that's actually a pretty darn big outlier. Both of these are pretty darn big outliers. That's just a huge outlier in general. I wonder how that changes. Yeah, so the par 4s actually drop in importance. So I'm thinking that's probably what is going to need to happen, is that we need to mitigate the importance in these par 4s, since this entire year here looks like it was a pretty big outlier. And with that, 1.7 out of a total of 4.3, again, 35 to 40% doesn't warrant enough of a percentage to look at it on its own. So it looks like we're going to be looking at total par 4s in general. Par 5s is a different story. We come over here to the par 5s, a total of a 2.4, but almost 3/4 of that is in one length, 1.5 to a half. So a majority of the par 5s come from 550 to 600, at least in terms of strokes gained total. Looking like we want to separate this length out by itself. You can see that again there, 2.4 total, 1.5 or 1.6. So exactly 2/3 of your strokes gained in par 5s come from this range, 550 to 600, which makes sense because 3 of the 4 par 5s fall into that range on the scorecard anyway. Okay, and then lastly, proximity. You're not going to gain a whole lot from the raw numbers. You'd have to look at it in terms of an evaluation against other courses. We did that last night, but just a quick review. Like 200 plus is the big number here at 60%, but I think we can look at just par 5s for that. And nothing else really stood out in terms of proximity. So there's a look at the Country Club at Jackson in some massive detail, in a detailed view, with where these strokes gained are coming these prior 5 years. Before we go to the early look file, this is a credit to Gabe. We looked at the Fortinet a little while back, and how, as much as it seemed like it would be an easy, or it's a resort course, it actually played pretty middle of the road in terms of difficulty. Why I keep harping on why birdies are so important, and not necessarily the eagles. Again, this is from last year. So, going from Max Homa's Fortinet win to Victor Hovland's Tour Championship. Sorted on the birdies here, the Sanderson Farms is 12th in terms of the most birdies, tied with the Sony Open, and we always talk about the Sony being a very easy tournament. So the Sanderson Farms yields the 12th most birdies or yielded the 12th most birdies on the PGA Tour last year. But it is not the 12th easiest course you can see. It's actually, I think, 17th or 18th. There are a few amount of bogeys here, but you just don't have a lot of eagles. If we were to sort on the eagles, it's actually pretty low. Pretty darn low. It falls to 17th. And, you know, it's quite a bit of ways away from places like the Sony, where it's tied with birdies. It's got a few less than the Waste Management, the John Deere, and it's in this real, you know, it's kind of in this second tier of cluster with these other tournaments here. It is certainly the easiest of these, you know, this cluster of tournaments, I would say. 0.8, you know, 0.85, 0.75, you have a 0.4, 0.3, and you have some over pars. But the main takeaway from Gabe's sheet here, and again, if you are a subscriber to his article, he sends you this spreadsheet constantly throughout the year to update you. The Sanderson Farms is, you know, tied for the 12th most birdies. Guys are just going to have to get their birdies, because bogeys will happen. Because we'll highlight the Sony and the Sanderson Farms here. Same amount of birdies, roughly the same amount of pars. There's just more bogeys here at the Sanderson Farms. That's why it plays a little bit more difficult. That's why I'm not too enthusiastic about using that easy to par filter. But why we're using birdies or better, there's just a lot of birdies on this course. A lot of birdies at the Country Club of Jackson. So thanks, Gabe, for sending that file out. Much appreciated. We're going to end the show off as we always do, as soon as I get there. There's a little bit of my research. But we're going to look at the field for this week, their historical performance at the Country Club of Jackson, and we're going to look at the metrics that we think are going to play quite a bit here and see who has performed the best at those metrics. So the first thing we're going to look at is off the tee. It was a major factor for a lot of our top performers. So Trey Mullinax, he's always been pretty darn good off the tee here, but he has not had the success. He has missed the cut 2 of 3 times, but he's generally an off the tee base player. Same with Cameron Champ, but he is a former winner here, and he's putt well here, which is not common. You generally do not see Cameron Champ anywhere in the green or in the positive for putting. He has putt this course extremely well, so probably someone you want to take a very long look at. But other players who have had sustained success here, Kevin Streelman, not known for his off-the-tee game. He's been good off the tee here. Scott Stallings, 4 for 5. Emiliano Grillo, 4 for 4. Hayden Buckley, 3 for 3. Let's see. DJ Tran, 2 for 4. Or excuse me, 3 for 4. No, 2 for 3. Get your life together. 2 for 3. Charlie Hoffman, 3 for 3. So there's a look at your top off-the-tee players. We will look at approach, but we're definitely going to be looking at putting as well. So a quick look at strokes gained approach. Top players, Ben Griffin from last year. Nick Hardy is 2 for 2 here. Not as many samples, but has performed well. MJ Duffy, 2 for 2. Cameron Percy, 2 for 2. There's Train again. Grillo. Dylan Fratelli, 4 for 5. Been very good with the irons here. Henrik Norlander, 3 for 4. C.T. Pan, 3 for 3. Tom Hoagie, 2 for 4. Not a whole lot of success, but he's popped on a few of the metrics tonight. Russell Knox, 2 for 3. Not a lot of success to show for it. Let's see, Davis Riley, 2 for 4. Doc Redmond, 3 for 3. Doug Gim, 3 for 4. So there's a look at some of your top approach players. The big factor, probably the biggest factor, the putting. Who is putt well here? You see Cameron Champ, 2 for 2, former champion. Mackenzie Hughes, defending champion, has putt extremely well here. Eric Cole did not play well here last year, but definitely putt well. Lonto Griffin, Nate Lashley, 3 for 4. Garrick Higo, only one time, but finished third last year. Charlie Hoffman, 3 for 3. Snedeker, 2 for 3. Peter Malnati, 4 for 5. Ryan Armour, former champion here, 3 for 5. Adam Long's 3 for 5. Nick Watney, 2 for 3. Some of these players have putt really darn well. Stefan Jaeger, probably one of the tournament favorites, 3 for 4. He's putt well here. C.T. Pan, Hayden Buckley, a lot of success. Kevin Streelman, a lot of success. Percy, McGirt. All right. Let's take a look at... We're going to skip the driving. Let's go to birdies gained, since that is a big facet that we definitely want to look at. Your top birdies gained players. Again, Higo, it's only one time. Cameron Champ again. Charlie Hoffman, Mackenzie Hughes, Heinrich Norlander, 3 for 4, Fratelli, 4 for 5, Malnati, Jaeger, Nick Hardy, 2 for 2, Neesmith, not a whole lot of success, but has been getting birdies at a decent rate. Buckley, Griot, Brant Snedeker, Streelman, MJ Duffy, 2 for 2. There's CT Payne again. All right. Par threes and par fives. And I think that'll probably do it for the show. Top par 3 performers. Historically, or I say historically, the past 5 years here at the Country Club of Jackson. Look at there. Cameron Champ again. Cameron Percy, 2 for 2. There's Streelman. McGirt is also a former champion, I think, back in 2015, 2014. I'm going to have to cheat now. He's a former winner here. Sergio Munoz, Cameron Champ, Armour. Nope, so McGirt isn't. I think he might have been in another course. Gribble, Malnati, and Nick Taylor have also won at the Country Club of Jackson. Mackenzie Hughes is up here. Svensson, a little bit less success. There's Adam Long. DJ Trahan. All right. Lastly, par fives. Do I look at 550 to 600 or all par fives? I think 550 to 6. I think is the way we want to look at that. So, top par 5 performers. Like again, Cameron Champ, Higo, Mackenzie Hughes, Davis Thompson, 2 for 2, Hayden Buckley, DJ Trahan, Joel Damon, 2 for 2, Norlander, 3 for 4, Fratelli, 4 for 5, Nick Watney's 2 for 3, Nate Lashley. So there's a look at some of the players who have performed the best at the key metrics historically at the Country Club of Jackson that we think are going to be the most pertinent for this week and success at the Sanderson Farms. That's going to do it for the show tonight. Congratulations again to Jeremy on your hit for Rio Hitsatsune on the DP World Tour. And a reminder that if you have success, whether it is fantasy golf, fantasy baseball, football, basketball when it comes along, whatever the case may be, if you are a regular here at Calls, please let me know in the comments or reach out to me on social media. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community who have success. So congratulations, Jeremy. And thanks to everyone who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate the support. Love what I do, taking an in-depth look at sports statistics and trying to win a little money in the process. Reminder that I posted that research to social media, so make sure to go check that out at your preferred social media site, X or Instagram, for all of the wagers that you've made so far this week for the Sanderson Farms, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Sanderson Farms. Until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.